So it had to be about 91, 1990, 91 that I wound up having to go on the run from the law. And I was riding with a group of outlaw bikers in Washington State. And, we're part living that biker lifestyle, man. And I was running a lot of drugs. And, and I had a cop that liked cocaine. And I would front him to cocaine. And he was like a rookie cop, But I would front him to cocaine and he would owe me money. And so if my name came down the pipe, then he would tip me off.
Okay.
And I'd clean out the operation. Well, one day he comes to me and he goes, man, he got a wad of money, pays me off. He goes, man, I don't want nothing to do with you no more. He goes, if I was you, I wouldn't just get out of town. I'd get out of state because the big dogs are coming after you, And I knew he was for real, man, And so I was making arrangements to take off, and I had a little girl with my ex-wife, and that was she was probably she was the first person that I ever really loved, and loved me back. She's like any little kid; she just loved unconditionally. But she was a real treasure in my life, and I loved her, and so I had to make arrangements for her to be taken care of because I knew I couldn't take her on the run from me or with me, but I knew also I don't have a lot of time to get this pulled off. So one evening, I went to my ex-wife's mother and said, look, man, your daughter, man, she's all messed up. And I had a page from her diary that I had taken and said, look, this is where she's at, man, and I got to run, you understand? I can't hang, I got to get out of here. Yeah, but I can't take Erin with me. I need to know someone's going to watch out for her. Will you and your husband watch out for her? And as she read the page, she began to shake and began to cry. And then she said, yes, we'll watch out for her. And then I took off, man, and I was headed south. And at a certain point on the highway, I want to throw this into the story because it's not something I always throw in there, but it's something that was impactful to me as a person was, I'm headed south, and it's dawning on me that I've just left the only person that I ever loved. She was my only, the only kid that I knew of, and I had just left this little person, and I loved her dearly, and I knew she loved me, and I had just abandoned her, and I remember that weighed so heavy on me, that I could feel it,
Oh.
and but I had no choice. I had to run, The sheriffs were coming after me, the troopers. I mean, they're going to come get me, and shut me down. And I had, made arrangements with the Brotherhood, and said, you watch out for Erin Lynn as you can, and everybody knew I had to go, And so I took off and I headed south and hung out in California for a while and then made my way down to Arizona. And my younger brother lived in a town called Yarnell. And my folks lived there as well. But as a matter of fact, my dad was preaching in a church in this town. When I was a little kid, my old man became a Christian. Okay, and then about 10 years old, 11 years old, my old man became a preacher for the first time, all right? But in my life, I came to the point, man, where I didn't believe in a God because of what was happening in my home, And I can tell you, I've been thinking about this, dude, because I want to tell the story, but I don't want to dishonor my father and my mom because I love them and I respect them, and God has restored my relationship with them. But I got to tell you ahead of time that in my dad's life, my grandfather, my dad's dad, was an evil man. He was a whiskey drunk, and he would drink whiskey and just be extremely violent. At 8 years old, he beat my father and then threw him in a ditch and left him for dead. He beat my grandmother to where she was, found wandering down the street naked, all beaten and bloodied, and the cops found her, and she didn't know who she was or where she was going. And this was a regular type of violence in my dad's home. through his father. So as I was growing up, I don't care who you are as a Christian. I don't care if you're a pastor, a preacher, a bishop, a pope. I don't care. No matter who you are, there's something in your life, there's stuff in your life. Even though you're endeavoring to follow Jesus Christ, there's still stuff in there, junk in there that God's got to get out.
Yeah.
And it takes a lifetime sometimes to get it all out, or as much as we let him. And I now look back on it and realize, the violence that my father grew up with, man, God was still trying to get that out of his life because it was coming out in my life, and it was abusive. My old man beat me with a piece of board off an old pallet that was so big and so heavy my mom couldn't swing it with one hand. He'd carved a handle in it,
Oh.
but it was so big and so heavy she couldn't swing it with one hand. She'd swing it with two. And you get it in the back or the arms or, because she wasn't a very good aim trying to swing that heavy thing, And my old man cut it down, but when my old man would hit you with it, it'd knock you across the room.
Oh.
And he'd come back and knock you to the other side, and leave you bruised up, But he had been, he became a follower of Jesus in a time period, where, man, it was judgment. God's out to smack everybody down, And it was all this judgment and legalism. He got taught that he could not be a preacher in the podium if he didn't wear a black suit and a white shirt and a black tie. You just couldn't go up there for that kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? And there was all this legalism and this judgment stuff that was going on in his world. And then he came out of this violent world in himself. And I look back and I go, God was working that out of my dad. And unfortunately, it came out on me, but it affected our relationship to the point where, at about 15 years old, man, there was a pretty brutal encounter between me and my dad, and I came back after a few days, and I started packing my stuff, and my old man came in the room, and I knew what he was going to say. That's why I was already packing my stuff. And my old man came in the room and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Man, I'm packing my bags." He's like, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "Look, man, I can't go to your church no more because I don't believe in your God like you do." And he said, "Well, you can do it my way or the highway." And I said, "Man, I knew you'd say that, so that's why I'm packing my stuff." And I took off hitchhiking as a young kid, and with what I could carry on my back and like $5 in my pocket. And that led to another, series of adventures where, I hitchhiked to the Quinault Rainforest in Washington State, and that's where I met these two old bikers named Itchy and Titch, and they ran a sawmill, and they gave me a job in the sawmill, and one thing I figured out right there, I started thinking, these guys who were these old bikers who were rough, they told me, "Hey, look, boy, we have 2 rules in the sawmill. No more than 2 beers a break, no more than 3 joints a day. Those are the rules." The Itchy could count to 3 on one hand, and Titch could count to 4. Because they had zipped fingers off in the sawmill, but I started experiencing was, wow, man, these guys gave me a cedar shack to live in. They taught me how to make cedar shakes by hand. They paid me, they gave me beer and weed, but never once did they hit me. Never once did they say you're stupid and no good. Never once did they say you're going to hell. And in my mind, I thought, well, if these ones are going to hell and those other ones are going to heaven, I'd rather go to hell because they treated me better than the quote-unquote Christian people. And so I made a serious mistake right there because I judged God based on the actions of a human being. And that's a major mistake because God's not at all like a human being because there isn't stuff in him that needs to be worked out. There isn't trash in him. From your own life that needs to be worked out. And so from there, a lot of adventures. I wound up in the Army. I got out of the Army, and then I became a logger in Washington State. And as some of this goes on, I can tell more of these stories and do it however you want. But then, I got to the point where I'm riding with the bikers, and I wind up on the run, man. And while I'm on the run, man, I wind up down in Arizona, and I'm living in this town of Yarnell. My brother had a trailer back out in the desert, and it was a trailer house where it was right up against the desert. Man, there was nothing behind, so I could see everything and everybody that was coming, but I wouldn't always stay there, man. I was always moving around. But my brother was really cool to let me stay there. His wife would I'd be coming in loaded, man. I'd come in loaded, and his wife would be like, "I'm just trying to tell you about Jesus, man. I'm trying to give you a gift, but you wouldn't accept it, And after I would say stuff, and she would wind up crying, and my brother still allowed me to stay there, man, And so eventually, though, that situation there in Yarnell ran out, and I wound up having to move down into the desert, down into the valley. And one side story, dude, here. I'm riding. I would drive all the way to Phoenix and go to the motorcycle mechanic school. So I'm going there to get my Harley Davidson credentials, to work on Harleys. And I would drive home to Yarnell. And Yarnell is like this. It's like a 5,000 foot high plateau, 3,000 foot high. I don't remember how, but it's way high up there. And you go up this windy, curvy, steep mountain road, and you go between these two rocks, and it opens onto this massive plateau. All right, beautiful place. But one day I'm driving home. All right, I'm driving back, and as I'm going, man, I in front of me is a massive, huge Arizona sunset. All right. It's brilliant, huge sun, And behind me, I look in my mirror and I see the most massive black thunder and lightning storm I've ever seen. And it's so massive, I stop to look at it. I turn around and I'm looking at it, man. And it goes all the way from the ground to as high as you can see it in the sky, and from north to south, man, because east was behind me. And I'm watching this thing, and it's so dark that the cars driving into it would disappear in the darkness. But I could turn the other way, and the sun would be so bright and brilliant, the cars would disappear in the light. So I'm standing there watching this, and all of a sudden I can feel the wind and hear the thunder, and I see the lightning come down and strike in the desert. And I'm like, holy cats, man, I need to get out of here, man, And I take off, and I'm jamming down the road 75, 80 mile an hour. And I can't outrun this storm. This black storm is overtaking me. And I remember going like, what is this? Like the wrath of God or something, man? I can't outrun this thing, And I come to to the crossroads. I come to a crossroad, and I either turn right and go up in the mountains where I live, or I turn left and go back towards that storm. Well, I turned right to go up into the mountains where I live, and up near the top of that plateau before you went through the two rocks is a turnout. And I thought, I wonder what that storm looks like from this high up. And I pulled over in the turnout, and when I turned and looked back, that storm was gone. So I don't know if I was the only one that saw that, or the cars that were driving into it could see it, But I now look back on that, and I see God was speaking to me. God was showing me in the natural realm, man, you're going to come to a place of decision. You're going to come to a crossroad. And you're either going to choose life, or you're going to choose death. But if you choose wrong, know this darkness will overtake you. And I believe God was truly showing me, this is your last chance, boy. This is your last chance. And it was a short time later that I had built myself a camp. I'm living in the desert, man. I got a really nice camp and on a river. I got a place to swim and bathe in the river. I can catch fish and shoot deer. I had built my own makeshift smoker, so I was smoking deer meat, and I was living pretty good out of the desert, and I drove my truck down into this ravine where this creek was running, and when I drove in, man, the water's only like that deep on my tires, all right? And I've been in there for weeks, months, and I don't remember how long I'm there I'd get up, go to school, come back to my camp, and one morning, man, I hear the water like going like crazy. And I crawl out of my tent and I look, and man, the river's risen almost all the way up to my camp. So, man, I roll everything up real quick, man. I throw it in my truck, and I'm going back out, and I got to cross that river again, okay, that creek. Well, when I cross on the way in, it's only yay deep. On the way out, it's coming in the bottoms of my doors. It had gotten that deep. So I made my way out of there, and I'm going to motorcycle school and explain what happened. And one guy goes, well, dude, you can come room with me. I look back on that incident, and I go, I really believe it was God who caused that flood to drive me out of that camp. Because there I was self-sufficient. I didn't need anybody, And why he didn't talk to me there, I don't know. But I wind up in the room with the guy I'm going to school with, Mike Sepsinko, and a really great guy. He one of the great treasures in my life, and he's a great brother, and I love him to this day. You know, and we had some amazing times together, and wild times, but amazing times there before Christ. You know, but I'm there in our apartment. All right, dude, we're building 3 Harleys in there. All right, and in my kitchen is a row of milk crates full of Harley parts because we're swapping parts out. You know, we had an old couch, and I can show you pictures of it, dude. And Mike had a big Nazi flag hanging there, and we had I can't remember. We had if there was a rebel flag or was it a Budweiser flag, and then we had a poster on the wall of like the Grim Reaper doing like Uncle Sam wants you, you know, and so we used the bathtub for a parts washer, you know, because so there was one spot in the bathtub towards the front that was still clean enough that you could stand in and get a shower, you know, and. I'm going to motorcycle school, and during school, you know, I had to stay straight and sober, you know. But I would roll joints and like tuck them in my beard because I had this great big old beard in those days, you know. And so that way, when I got home, you know, I just pull a joint out of my beard and light it up, pour myself a whiskey, and you know. And I come home from school one day, dude, and I put the key in the door. And before all this started happening, man, there was a couple Jesus freaks that tried to give me a Bible. And I took the Bible from him, and I turned it, and I just threw it in that pile of Harley parts. And told him, man, if you ever come back here again, you know, I'll chain you to the back of that bike, and I'll drag you down the street, and we'll find out if your God is real or not. And the one guy dropped that Bible and ran. And the other guy, when his buddy seen he left him, he ran too. Well, that's why I picked that Bible up and just threw that thing into the pile of Harley parts, man, and never gave it a thought, you know. And of all the stuff we did, I never saw the thing again in the crates. I went in those crates pulling parts in the kitchen all the time. Never did pay attention to that thing. And so I come home one afternoon from going to school, and I go to put the key in the door, dude. And I wish someone had been there with me. But I put the key in the door. I open the door. Before I can get the key out, I hear a voice speak to me from my ceiling. And if you had been standing beside me, I could have pointed to the spot in the ceiling where the voice came from. And the voice spoke out, just like you're hearing my voice right now. I hear this voice, and it goes, "You think you're in control, but I tell you I am. I even control the universe." Man, that scared the soup out of me. So I went to the nearest bar I could find, and I got snot-slinging drunk, dude. I got so drunk that I don't remember coming home. I woke up on the floor of my apartment the next day. I got up, went to school, came back the next night, put the key in the door, opened the door. Before I could get the key out, that voice spoke again from the ceiling. And it said, "If you'll let me, I'll change your life for you." And I shut the door and I went to the bar again. And I remember sitting on the bar stool going, man, I've done so many drugs. I fried my last brain cell, man. I'm going insane. I'm hearing voices, man. You know, I'm going nuts. And again, I got just loaded at the bar and woke up on the floor again and went to motorcycle school again and came home that night. This time I put the key in, opened the door and I stepped back away from the door. And I kind of peeked inside like this and no voice. So I went inside and I thought in my head, if I can just get to the whiskey jug before that voice speaks, I'll just write it off as bad whiskey. And I never made it to the whiskey jug, man. From behind me, the voice spoke. And it said, "If you'll let me, I'll change your life for you." And I turned around and I looked at the ceiling where the voice came from. I said, "Look, I don't know who you are or where you are, but I wish you'd leave me alone." I said, "Because you're making me crazy." I said, "Look, you got the wrong apartment, you got the wrong address. Try that guy next door, okay?" And I started to walk away, and I turned around and looked and went, "Look, if this is like God or something, then you done got the wrong building altogether." I said, "Because you ain't even in a church." I said, "Look, man, we're building Harleys in here. We got the Nazi flag over here. We got the Grim Reaper over here. There's booze in the freezer. There's drugs on the table. There's women in and out of here. You done got the wrong building altogether." And as soon as I shut my mouth, that voice spoke back and said, "I didn't come for the building you're in, but I came for your heart." And I looked back at the ceiling where the voice came from and said, "Look, I don't even like Christians. I don't want to be one. Leave me alone." And for 3 days, the voice didn't talk to me again. But on the third day, I'm in the shower and I'm starting to think about, man, I've tried to live by a warrior's code and an outlaw biker code of honor. And I thought, man, I know I've broken that code of honor before. And then I thought, man, I must have had feelings somewhere in my life. I've become cynical and hard, man. And I thought, if I had feelings, I didn't know when I lost them or how to get them back. And then I had the thought, well, maybe I lost them when my old man was beating me as a kid. And then I thought, if I lost them that far back, how do I get them back? And I came out of the shower, and I walked into my kitchen, and I looked down into the pile of Harley parts. And all of a sudden, that Bible stood out to me. And I reached down, I don't know why I did, but I reached down and I picked the thing up. And I went over and sat down in my raggedy old couch. And I didn't have a couch that sat on, I had a couch that sat in, And I put the thing down on the table, and it fell open. And I look down on the page, and I read this story. And it says this dude, Jesus, is dying on the cross. And he looks down, sees his bro. And he looks down, sees his mama. And he said, Mom, behold your son. And son, behold your mom. And I read that, I thought, man, if this story's true, then that dude on the cross is one bad dude. Because he's dying, but he still had the presence of mind to talk to the two people on the ground. And when I thought that, from over my shoulder through the wall, I hear it again. I died for you too. I said, well, you shouldn't have done it, man. You made a mistake. You should have never died for me, because I would have never died for you. And then the voice spoke this to me, and it said, but I loved you too. When I heard the voice say that, I physically could feel right here in the center of my chest, it felt like a shell breaking off inside of me. And I felt a tear run down this side of my face, and I said, I'm sorry. I was wrong. You are God. When I said that, I felt an explosion in my chest. Boom! And I could feel what felt like a beam of light shining out of the middle of my chest. And I sat there with tears just running down my face. And I didn't know that Jesus just came in my heart. Even though I had been a preacher's son from like 11 to 15, I know what a flannel graph is, I've been to Sunday school, but I had wandered so far from God in those 17 years. I was 32 years old at this point. I'd wandered so far from God at that point, I wanted nothing to do with him. I had rejected him so much. When I went to service, the man said, what religion are you? I said, none, there is no God. The man said, well, we're going to put no preference on your dog tags, because when you get shot, boy, you're going to want somebody to pray for you, And that's how I had gotten so far from God that I didn't even realize that was Jesus who had just come in my heart. I just knew I had been wrong all those years. There was a God, and this guy was him. That moment changed my life, because my life turned 180 degrees the opposite direction. I instantly quit cursing. I quit doing drugs, and I quit drinking whiskey. About a week went by, and Mike came back, and he looked at me. He goes, Matt, dude, there's something different about you. Something's changed, but I can't quite put my finger on it, And that's I realized, I said, oh, Mike, I said, something did happen to me. I said, because I ain't smoked no dope. I ain't drank no whiskey. And I ain't cussed in a week. And I told him about the voice and all of that, and he goes, man, I don't know about that. I just know something's different. Well, dude, I ran and looked in the mirror. He could see it. I looked in the mirror. I couldn't see nothing. I saw the same hairy old face, And I came out of that, and it was about a week, somewhere in this first 2 weeks. I didn't even go to church, because it didn't occur to me to go to church, And I go to this brother's house named Sleazy Rick, and Sleazy rolls up a joint and lights it and passes it to me. Well, after 20 plus years of smoking weed, I just reached out and took the joint and hit it. But the moment I hit that joint, dude, it was like I felt like a wall went up between me and that voice. And I handed it back and said, no, man, I don't want no more of that. That's because if it causes that wall between me and that voice has got life in it. And I don't want that. I don't want no wall between me and the voice. I want that voice because that voice has got life in it. And I didn't even think to call the voice Jesus. It was just the voice. I would hear the voice. And the voice would say stuff to me. And a short time I'm laying, got up one morning and I have this heavy dream, and I wake up and I hear the voice. And the voice says, get up and go to church, and I'll speak to you there. I said, sir, I don't even know where there is a church. you know, and I've been up late 2 nights in a row. How about I go next time, okay? And I fell back asleep, and I slept exactly 30 minutes and had an even heavier dream the second time. And when I woke from that dream, the voice said, get up and go to church, and I'll speak to you there. And he didn't say it like a suggestion the second time, you know. And I jumped and said, yes, sir, you ain't got to tell me again. I jumped in the shower, and I'm thinking, man, I don't even know where there is a church. You know, but all of a sudden I remembered this guy who was also a former outlaw biker. He was a former Marine, had a Nazi SS branded in his shoulder with hot irons, you know. And I remember him trying to tell me about Jesus in a bar one night. And you know, I told him at that time, hey, look, dude, you used to be cool. I thought you were cool, but you just blew it. Get away from me. But that morning I remembered him. And man, I jammed down to his house. I start pounding on his door going, Chet, get up. Get up and take me to church with you. And the dude comes to the door still in his drawers, you know. He's like, dude, take it easy. We'll go, but we just got to wait for them to open, you know. And I'm like, hey, the voice didn't say nothing about waiting for him to open. The voice said go, you know. And so he takes me to this church, and Chet had a shaved head, and he would wear long sleeves, you know, and a tie, you know, so he looked more like a citizen. You couldn't tell, you know, the tattooed biker past, and a really great guy. He was an amazing guy, man of incredible character. But I go there, man, and I'm the only long-haired tattooed guy in the place, you know. And at the end of the service, the suit comes up to me. He goes, hey, man, do you need a job? And I'm going, well, actually, in fact, yeah, I do, man, because I had quit running drugs and I had no money coming in, you know. And he goes, he handed me his card. He said, you'll show up here tomorrow. He said, I'll give you a job. So I showed up at the job, and the guy began to teach me to lay tile and cut tile and all of that. And I would go to work with this guy. And, dude, for me, church wasn't just a Sunday thing. Because every day I would go to work with this guy, he'd start the day out praying. And then all day long, the guy would tell me Bible stories all day long. So I was getting church 5 days a week, plus going to church on Sunday. You know, so I was getting like this crash course of, you know, or maybe a refresher course of what I knew as a little kid, you know. And a short time later, man, there's so many stories I could tell you going so many directions. A short time later, you know, I graduated school, and for whatever reason, I'd never thought about Alaska in my life. But all of a sudden, I had this crazy desire to go to Alaska, you know. And people say, well, what are you going to do when you graduate school? I say, I'm going to go to Alaska. I'm going to Alaska. They'd be like, dude, why are you going to go? You're a biker. Why would you go to Alaska? There's all that snow. How are you going to ride a Harley? I'm like, no, man, I'm going to Alaska, you know. And 5 months later, out the blue, somehow, I don't remember how, but somehow, because there were no cell phones in those days. Maybe I must have called my folks or something. They were living in Skagway, Alaska at the time. Also with my same younger brother. They had all moved up there together. And somehow I got a hold of my old man. And, you know, he tells me, hey, man, he stopped at this restaurant. Goes into this restaurant and gets coffee all the time. And while he was in there having coffee, he said this biker just happened in there. And they just happened to strike up a conversation. Well, if you knew my old man, he ain't the kind of guy who's going to strike up the conversation with some biker, you know. Yeah, even though I was his son, you know. And the guy says, "Oh man, they're advertising for mechanics at the Harley shop in Anchorage." So my old man says, "Here's the number." So I called the guy, and he said, "Well, man, if you'd only called me a week ago." He goes, but we already hired somebody from Michigan, man. So, but leave me your name and number. So I did that, you know. And a couple of weeks went by, and Barry from the Harley shop in Anchorage calls me, and it says, "Hey, man, that guy from Michigan never showed." He goes, "You want to come to Alaska?" I said, "Yeah, sure." He said, "How soon can you be here?" I said, "Give me a week, earn a little money, and I'll head out." You know. So I worked a week, and I think I made $260, you know, and I had a '71 Jimmy, man, a panel van. You know, it was a hippie van. It had Deadhead stickers and Harley stickers, and it had American flag for a curtain and feathers and beads hanging in it, and so I took off, man, in a '71 Jimmy that got 10 miles to the gallon on a downhill with a tailwind, you know. Well, I had taken all my old rock and roll records and tapes, and I sold them to this record shop and got an extra $60. And the old AM radio in the Jimmy didn't work, so I bought a boom box and wedged it between the seats, and I bought one Christian CD. You know, it was a Michael Card CD. Oh, and right before I left, you know, I thought, man, you know, if I'm gonna follow this guy, if I'm gonna follow the voice, I probably should get his book and read it. You know, so I go into this Christian bookstore, and I walk in there, man, you know, and I can see the fear come on this guy's face. He's thinking he's going to get robbed or something, you know. You could see it. And I walked up and like, hey, man, you got any Bibles in here? And the guy's like, you see, he lets out this sigh, you know. And he goes, oh, yes. And he takes me over and he picks out this. It's called a Life Application Bible. And he goes, this one's pretty easy to read. So I think he must have looked at me and this guy probably doesn't read very good. I better give him an easy one with pictures, you know. So I buy that from him. I take off. I got a boom box, and I got this one Christian CD that I listen to over and over. And I leave Arizona, and I get into Southern California, man, and this Michael Card CD is going. I don't remember all the songs on it, but there's this one song that says, I will be your home. You know, from this fearful fallen place, man, I'll be your home. And it's a really cool song, but I start singing with the song. All right? Now, if you hear me sing, it's not going to move you. It'll make you want to move, but it ain't going to move you. You know what I'm saying? So I'm singing along, you know, and man, I don't know nothing. You know what I'm saying? I don't know any of the spiritual stuff, you know, or any of that stuff. I'm just trying to follow the voice. All right? And I'm driving along singing a song, and all of a sudden, the best way I can describe this to you was like this thing just goes whoosh over my whole body. I feel it all at once. And I start laughing like a crazy person. I start laughing like I done hit 3 hits of Microdot, you know? And then all of a sudden I start crying. Then I'm laughing and crying at the same time. And tears are coming down so hard that I can't hardly see to drive the road, you know? And I remember thinking, I said, oh man, I said, look, God, I said, you got to give me a break, man, or you got to drive. I said, because I can't even see the road, you know? And at a certain point I look down and see my gas gauge is going empty. And I'm like, oh man. I said, God, man, you got to give me a break. I said, because I can't go in there and just buy gas like this, you know? And he never did give me a break. And I thought, you know what the heck? I'm in Southern Cal. They're just going to think I'm some hippie on drugs, man. So I pulled over, pumping my gas, laughing and crying like a crazy person. Went in and paid the lady. She never batted an eye, you know? And I headed north, you know? And when I was working with the guy, the Jesus freak guy that hired me, when I'm working with him laying towel one day, he says to me, you know, God cares about the desires of your heart. I said, no kidding, huh? And I went home that night, and I still hadn't figured out that he was in here. I thought he was in the ceiling because that's where I heard the voice come from. So I looked at the ceiling. I said, hey, sir. I said, that guy says that you care about the desires of my heart. I said, here's my list. I said, number 1, I want to go to Alaska. Number 2, I'd like to see my daughter for her 10th birthday. Number 3, I'd like to be healed of the things that are wrong with me from the life I've lived. And I didn't know that he did, you know, and the man said it, so I believed it, and I fired it out to the ceiling, you know. And so 5 months later, I'm on my way to Alaska to work for Harley Davidson. I pulled into my daughter's driveway the night of her 10th birthday party. Got to take her out for her 10th birthday. But I got $260 trying to make it to Alaska, all right? You know, and I burned $200 in gas just trying to get to Washington State. And I take my daughter to see her grandparents. She's got to do something at their house. And I'm walking around my van, and as I walk by the van, the voice speaks to me and says, go in your van and read the Bible. I said, look, sir, I can't do that. I said, I'm the only one here who believes in you. They're going to think I'm nuts. And I walked around the van a little while, and as I went by the van again, I hear the voice, and the voice says, go in the van and read your Bible. And I thought, what the heck, they already think I'm nuts. And I go in there, man, and I should go up and get it and show you. I picked the thing, and it just fell open. And I looked down on the page, man. I now know I was reading Haggai number 2, all right? And but I didn't know what I was looking at then. I'm just in the book, you know? And I read it, and it describes my life before I believe there's a God. And I'm like, holy cats, man, that's my life before I believe there's a God. And it's in this book, you know? And so I take my daughter to my ex-wife's house, and my ex-wife is like, man, you were nuts, man. You've done so many drugs, you fried your last brain cell. She goes, you're not, you were stuck here. There's no way you get to Alaska on $60. She goes, your God has left you here. And I said, no, man. I said, man, this is like that story about that cat named Mo in this book. And all them Jewish people, and he took them out in the desert, and they said, Mo, what, there weren't enough graves in Egypt, you bring us out here to die? And Mo said, no, God's going to help us, just watch. And I said, look, I know that story's in this book somewhere. I'll show you. And I picked the book up and went whack, and I turned to the exact same page in Haggai number 2. I handed it to my ex-wife and goes, look, you read that and see that ain't my life before I believe there's a God. She read that, she closes that and goes, that could be a coincidence. Right? And so was I think 2-3 days later, I get a phone call from my mom in Skagway, Alaska, and she says, man, this lady came to her house and said, hey, God told me to come to your house, and do you have a son trying to get to Alaska? And my mom says, yes. And she goes, well, God told me to buy him tickets on the ferry to Alaska. So some lady that I never met, and to this day I don't know. But I got a phone call that says, hey, there are tickets waiting for you at the Bellingham Ferry to come to Alaska. So I drive my old van there. My ex-wife's with me, and it's typical gray, rainy Washington day, But as I get to the ferry, pull in the parking lot, the rain stops. And I start loading my gear onto the ferry. And before that ferry pulls out a dock, the rain stops, the cloud front, it's a perfect blue sky. I gave the old van to my ex and everything and said, look, you can sell it, you can have the money, do whatever you want, And the next 3 days sailing to Alaska was perfect sunny weather. Beautiful, calm ocean. The captain was like, I've never seen ocean this calm before, And people were so lucky I was on that boat. And one of the cool things was when I read that passage in Haggai number 2, as you get past the end, or towards the end of it, said, from this day forward, from the 24th day of the month, I'll bless you. Well, 3 days of sailing on that boat, the ferry to Alaska, I landed in Skagway, Alaska, on the 24th day of the month, just like it said in the book. All right? So I literally walked into Alaska with my rifle, my bow, the hand-carried toolbox that I had, the rucksack I was issued in the 70s, and $6 in my pocket. That's how I arrived in Alaska. Well, my brother lived in that town, and there's so many details I could throw in here, man. It's an artsy, fartsy, touristy town, so I made these Native American bone chokers, and I thought maybe I can sell them to somebody, make enough money to get to Anchorage. And the sister-in-law, who was always trying to tell me about Jesus, and I would make her cry, she was so happy now. And so nobody, I went to every art shop I could find, and nobody would buy those necklaces. So I was like, man, I don't know how I'm going to do it. And I go back, and she goes, man, I think God told me to tell you that if you go down this street, around the back, in a little alleyway, there's a little art shop back in there. If you go there, they'll buy those necklaces from you. So I'm like, okay, man, and I didn't doubt, because I thought, well, I hear the voice from the ceiling. I thought everybody hears the voice, I didn't know how it worked, So I went down to that alleyway, and that lady said, well, if you can put longer bands on them, I'll buy 3 of them from you. $20 a piece. So I put longer bands on them, man. Got $60 from her, and in those days, you could buy enough gas to get from Skagway to Anchorage on $60. So we got to Anchorage. My younger brother drove me, and we take me to the Harley shop the next day, which turned out to be a Sunday. I walk up the stairs, and the boss's wife, Karen Matson, comes out. And I said, hey, I'm the new guy, man. I said, the old man said you could put me up for a while till I get on my feet. And she goes, okay, well, you can have that room right there, but we don't allow smoking in the rooms. I said, that's okay, ma'am, I don't smoke. She goes, well, we'd rather you don't party in the rooms neither. I said, that's okay, ma'am, I don't party no more. I had an encounter with God 5 months ago. The lady literally started jumping up and down and hooting and hollering in the hallway, dude, And she stopped. I'm looking like, holy cats, And she stops and goes, I've been praying for 2 years for a Christian to come work here. want to go to church with me? So I looked at my little brother. He went, and I'm like, all right, we'll go to church with you. And man, I still didn't know nothing, And I go to church, and I want to stop there a second and go back, because she said I prayed for 2 years for a Christian to come work here. All right? And then I found out later when I met my wife that God had told her, the man that you are with is not the man that I have for you. And she said she went home and knelt down in her dirty laundry and prayed and said, God, if this is not the man you have for me, then I pray that the man you have for me, that you bring him to me. And I realized, you know what, I believe I'm a follower of Jesus today because of the prayers of two women who never knew me. The lady prayed for 2 years. I had only believed in Jesus for 5 months at that point. So that means the first year and a half of her praying, she would seem like she was getting nowhere. But she was praying for somebody she never knew. And that prayer, I think, was part of what made God reach out to me. Now, it might have also made her think about, you know what, next time I need to be more specific about my prayers, because that's the answer to it, So I go to church with her, and I'm sitting in the back row, and I'm the only long-haired tattooed guy in the place. My younger brother's, got a nice citizen and a former Coast Guard guy, and he's sitting on my right. My new boss's wife's sitting on my left. And I'm watching, all of a sudden, I see this fine-looking mama going down the aisle, and she got on one of these kind of dresses, and the girl's moving it down the aisle, So I looked at my little brother and said, hey, that's a hot-looking babe, huh? My little brother said, hey, man, you in church? I said, oh, yeah. I looked up to the ceiling, and I said, look, sir, I'm sorry if I was out of line by that. I didn't mean nothing. I just thought you did a good job. That's all I'm saying, And I seen that girl down front, and I thought, man, if I'd have known they had chicks like that in church, I'd have gone before. And a year later, that turned out to be Wanda. We've been married 28 years now, But when that happens, I see all of that happening. And Reverend Dick Stretch was the preacher. Loved that guy greatly, man. I learned a great deal from going there. And Mary Glacier was a teacher lady there, and I would go and listen to her, And all of them have a special place in my heart. Karen Madison and all of them, because that was a point in my life when God was really bringing change in my life. And so the service, I listened to him preaching, and I go, oh, that preacher preached pretty good. Right? And some of the stuff I'm going to tell you, man, I have no explanation for. I don't understand it myself, all right? But I no more than think that, all right? I get hit in the head with what feels like to me like a bolt of lightning, and it hits me and runs straight down my spine. And I shoot up out of that chair like, yo, man! I said, did you feel that? I'm looking at my little brother. I look like Joe Cocker up there from it. Ow! And my little brother's like, no, man. He said, what happened? I said, I don't know, dude. But it felt like someone stuck my finger in a light socket, man. And I'm standing there, and he's looking at my new boss wife looking at me, and people are starting to leave the church building. And as a dark-haired lady, I don't know her to this day, and her old man and a little kid, and the dark-haired lady stops, and she points, and she's shaking as she's pointing, and she goes, the anointing of God's on that young man right there. And I looked at my brother, man, he's scooting away from me. I looked back at the lady, I said, lady, look, you got the wrong guy, man. I didn't do nothing. I was just sitting here, man, So, and I wasn't for sure what that was about, And I have no explanation for that, As I've gotten older and I've endeavored to follow Jesus for some time now, that was January 20th, 1993, when I said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. You are God. All right? I realized looking back, everything that the creator of the universe said to me, I had an argument for, except for one. The last thing he said to me was, but I loved you too. And I realized I had no argument for that love. And I realize now it was his love that changed me. You see what I'm saying? And sometimes people, when they listen to that story, they get so focused on, that I was this outlaw biker and all the bad stuff that I did, that you miss the point of the story. If you take anything out of the story, take what God said, what the voice spoke from the ceiling. You think you're in control. But I tell you, I am. I even control the universe. If you'll let me, I'll change your life for you. I didn't come for the building you're in, but I came for your heart. I died for you too. But I loved you too. Take those things from the story, because those are the things that changed my life. If you'll take those things from the story, and you can come to the same place that I did, where you can respond to the voice and let him change your life. If you can come to the same place that I did that says, I'm sorry, I was wrong, you are God. He'll change your life, and you'll be blessed for it. Don't mean you ain't going to have hard times. You're going to have them, man. But you're going to be blessed along the way. And as long as you endeavor to follow him, as long as you'll let him change your life for you. Just like, I'll throw this out there, as I said, my old man, as he was, even though he was a preacher, he still had stuff that he had to let God change in his life. I don't care what, even if you're a preacher on the TV or the radio, there's still stuff in your life that God wants to change, if you'll let him. But if you'll let him, you'll be blessed for doing it. And I want to tell you that after I married Wanda, one day out of the blue, my mom and dad showed up in Anchorage, took us to a restaurant, and at the end of the meal, all of a sudden my mom fell on me crying. My dad and my mom sitting right there, and they said to me, will you forgive us for what we did to you as a kid? And I said, you know what, man, we can't change history. What's been done has been done. But I'll tell you what, we can wipe that slate clean and start all over again. And I realized over the years, you know what? When God came looking for me, when no one else was looking for me other than the law, he wanted me when no one else wanted me. He was giving me love when there was no love to be found in my life. But I now can look and see, you know what? At the same time that God was working on changing me, he was changing my parents as well. He was turning their lives around. As they were willing to let him change their lives, he was changing it. And the same goes for you and me. I've endeavored now to follow Jesus for, next year will be 30 years. But I still realize, man, even after all that time, there's still more that I got to go, God, you know what? Help me to let you change my life. Change me and deliver me for your great purpose, O Lord. And there's a story where I get that prayer from. You just got to remind me where we left off next time so I can tell you more,